And we're here again with Pat McGuigan. Thanks for joining us this morning. Looking towards next year, there's a lot of controversy swirling around the Oklahoma Department of Education. What are some of the issues there?
Well, you could almost have predicted it. We've talked about a couple. Because it's a time of change, there's a lot of stress, a new philosophy in charge of the department. First, we've talked already about the controversy about some of the initial hires and whether or not those will stand up. Because full authority was not yet in Superintendent Barresi's hand. Now she does have full authority, so the questions change. Last week, the Board of Education, which now is narrowly in control of Governor Fallon and Superintendent Barresi, made some funding decisions. They boosted, or retained, I should say, funding for early childhood education, but did not fund the stipends, the annual stipends for nationally board certified teachers, and that triggered a lot of criticism.
Now, why is early education receiving more funding?
Actually, that's an interesting question, whether they're receiving more funding. In some analyses, they are. Others say that's not the case because there's an explicit requirement to fund early childhood education at a certain level. Now, the criticisms are coming from a couple of Democrats, serious men, Joe Dorman, Ed Kennedy, rural Democrats, but also from Ginger Tenney, a conservative who runs the Professional Oklahoma Educators, the state's most significant non-union association of teachers. So I'm not sure it's just politics. I think there's some substance to the criticisms. At the same time, a defense can be made of the position that Superintendent Barresi has taken.
Now, what is Educare and why is there a conflict there?
Educare is a group, is a business, it's a school, early childhood education in both Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and I'm frankly not sure they may have other locations, but it's funded and supported and boosted by the George Kaiser Family Foundation. And the source of a potential conflict of interest arises from Phil Lankin, one of the new members of the board, who works for the foundation and who is on the board of Educare and is also on the state board. So the contention's made that him voting in favor of the early childhood education funding might have been a conflict of interest. On the flip side, a Barresi spokesman made a passionate defense in an interview yesterday, Damon Gardenhire, and he made a strong case. The language in the statute says shall. There shall be this funding for early childhood education. He also says a lot of the criticisms are Monday morning quarterbacks. They had to make tough choices, and they did.
What about the economic condition of Oklahoma? There have been a lot of studies coming out lately, and recently you wrote an article posing the question, is Oklahoma a rich state or a poor state?
It's like a lot of other things. I used the title, The Eyes of the Beholders. It depends on how you look at it. We are unarguably a state that's historically poor. The contention that ALEC makes, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and Professor Laffer, Arthur Laffer of the Laffer Curve fame of the Reagan era, is that we're on our way to being a richer state. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We, based on a number of economic factors they look at, we're the 14th best economic outlook and the 9th best in economic performance over the last decade. So as I say, they make the case that we're on the way to being richer.
Now, what about taxes? How does that play into this?
Taxes is, of course, critical. If you look at Oklahoma, property taxes relatively low, income taxes declining, but we're somewhere in the middle in overall tax burden, and the argument that some conservatives make is that when you reach that conclusion and then you adjust for cost of living, that our tax burden is relatively high. I think, if I remember right, we're the 21st best of the states. So again, it depends on how you analyze, but they make the contention we're on our way to being richer. OCPA, Oklahoma Council for Public Affairs, they cheer on these developments, but Oklahoma Policy Institute, very articulate spokesman David Blatt makes the case that the analysis is inadequate. It doesn't go far enough, and it doesn't look at quality of life and other issues.
Where do we rank compared to other states?
Better than in the past, and that's probably something that would be agreed upon by a lot of different observers. 63.2% improvement in per capita personal income in the past decade, improvement in non-farm employment growth, 18th best in the state, and 22nd best in the nation in in-migration, meaning people moving here. So making progress.
All right, very interesting. Thanks for joining us. People can check out your news website, CapitolBeatOK.com, to hear more on these issues.